I just have such a hard time actually believing that this day is happening. That we are in here, in a hall together, able to practice in person. So again, I imagine for many of you that you haven't actually been sitting with other people in community. You may have been sitting online, attending Zoom gatherings, but to actually be in a room together, this is a pretty precious, special time. And I feel so honored to be here with you, with the Edmonton Insight Sangha, to be with you for this first gathering. And then it's also interesting to see the effects of COVID still here, and how usually, there would be more of a group sitting closer together, and just to acknowledge that we're all still being really, really careful, as we should be. I wanted to take a time to just take the opportunity to offer a deep and heartful welcome to all of you. And as I said, it's really a precious gift for us to spend this time together, to practice together, and to study the teachings of the Buddha together. And I wanted in this welcoming also to acknowledge all the different background and experiences that all of us bring. So regardless of abilities and disabilities, our gender identities, race or cultural backgrounds, country of origin, religious backgrounds, our size, our age, our first language, our sexual orientations, our educational background or social class, or any other type of diversity in this room that I haven't actually named, I welcome all of it. And I deeply encourage all of us to bring our full selves here with all our histories, our lineages, and all our current circumstances. So the deepest intention with coming together here is really to create this community of care and safety, where we together can deepen in meditation, wisdom, and compassion. And I'm also hoping as this retreat unfolds, and that you may connect with other parts of yourself that you may not have connected with for a long time, that you will also be able to welcome all parts of yourself as they arise through this meditation retreat, so that we can have this sense of inner safety and this sense of outer safety with each other and inside of us. So may everything that arises inside belong with an atmosphere of care and friendliness, so that we can meet all our experiences with this caring attitude. That's one of the deep hopes of this time together. So I'm actually going to invite all of us. Some of you have already been sitting here, and you may know each other well already, but just to, if you don't want to look around, but just maybe to sense the room of people around you. And if you want to look around, please do that. But just to get a sense that we're here in community and with other people, and maybe just take a moment to extend this wish for us to together to create this container of safety. And here we are. So as I was planning for this retreat, I was really wondering, it's always interesting offering a retreat to a group of people that I actually know a few of you, but most of you I don't know. So to be planning and sort of imagining what's needed here, like what would be really useful for you. That's always a little bit hard. So I've sort of been trying to imagine what brought you all here tonight. What made you this precious Friday evening at the end of the week? What inspired you to come here this evening, and for many of you to come here this whole weekend? And again, I imagine that part of it is this opportunity to actually come together in community and practice together. That probably brought a lot of you out. And I think I know that many of you already have practice experience. Many of you have sat retreats before, probably most of you. But I'm also pretty sure that there's a handful of people where this may be their very first retreat experience. So again, just to welcome all of you, and if this is new for you, for you to feel really welcomed and hopefully a sense of safety. And just to let you know, there might be a lot of new faces and a lot of new words that come up that you may not have heard before. And to be very gentle with yourself and very kind with yourself as new phrases, new words may come up that you haven't heard before. And trust that whatever needs to land inside will land inside, and you can sort of let the rest go. So instead of sort of trying to listen from your head, I'm going to invite you to try to listen more from your bodies and listen from a receptive place where you're not trying to get all of it, but where you can trust that if you relax back and down into your bodies, if you practice opening your heart as much as you can, that whatever parts of it is ready to connect with you will connect with you, and then you can let the rest go. So I'm hoping that part of your motivation for coming was this wish to learn about body and nature, because that's what we're going to be exploring this weekend. So I'm hoping that for some of you that you had an interest in this. And I'm wondering and I'm thinking that maybe in this time through COVID, where traveling other places has been sort of limited, that maybe for a lot of you, you've had more time to spend in nature. Maybe you've gone for more walks, maybe you've, just been outside more around Edmonton. And so maybe you've had a chance to feel the potentially healing effects that nature can have on our bodies and minds. As we spend time in nature, you may have felt sort of this preciousness in the natural environment. And maybe part of what's bringing you here as well is that with this looming awareness of our current climate crisis, the beauty and preciousness of our natural environment may have become more present for you. So maybe somewhere in the background of your awareness, there's a calling into nature. There's a calling of what can I learn about body and nature? And there might also be part of you that is wondering, how can I respond to what's happening with our climate? How can I show up? How might this practice help me be with everything in the environment the way that it is? So again, my hope is for this weekend that we can explore this topic of body and nature together, and that it will be a benefit to each one of us individually. And then I also have a wish and a hope that it will actually be a benefit to all living beings. And I also have a hope that it will be a benefit to this earth that we share, this shared home that we have. That somehow, as we attune in a deeper way inside, that it will increase our sensitivity to our natural environment, and that this sensitivity will support us in responding in ways that are kinder, more mindful, more aware. So, some of you may be brand new to this Providence Renewal Center, and other of you may have walked here before. And again, I had this little wish that everybody at least had a chance to just walk around the building and take a look at the environment around you. Maybe you walked around a little bit. Maybe you actually had a chance to take in the beauty of the land and the smells of the earth and all the plants. And even if you didn't have a chance this evening to take in the natural environment here, maybe in this moment right now, you can actually call up in your mind a recent memory of when you've been in nature, in a natural environment. So that I'm just inviting you sort of in your mind's eye to see if you can recall and remember the last time you might have been, out somewhere in nature. I think what often happens to us when we are in nature is that there potentially is this deep shift within us. When we are in a natural environment that's relatively untouched by humans, then often what we might notice is that our shoulders come down a little bit. This body takes a deeper breath. Muscle tension is relaxed. And we seem to often move into this deeper sense of here and now presence. And what we can notice is that our sense door experiences are often felt with much greater vividness. So the sounds are much crisper, the sights that we see are much brighter, the smells can be way more vibrant, and the touch sensations of walking and breathing and moving our bodies are often feeling much more alive. And there's just a greater sense of intimacy, a greater sense of aliveness that we feel when we're in nature. And often, if we stay long enough, what we'll notice is that the usual busyness of the mind also starts to quiet down a little bit as we attune to nature. So all the different stories that we keep in our minds, all the different worries that we repeat in our heads, should I do this, or should I do that, or what about this, or what am I going to do about these plans? All these things that we're constantly fabricating, stories that we're fabricating in our minds about our lives, when we are in nature, often by themselves, without any effort, they often seem to quiet down a little bit and they become less important. So they may not vanish totally, most often they probably won't, but they just don't, the allure of them just don't pull us in so much. So it's like they lose their gravity, they lose their pull of our attention. And then there can be just hearing the wind in the trees, hearing the birds singing, sensing the wind on our faces or the sun on our backs, seeing the very bright green colors of the tree, or the snail moving slowly on the ground, or smelling the sweet scent of flowers, or the freshness of the spring soil. So my sense is that spring recently arrived to Edmonton, now living on the land of the Songhees peoples in Victoria. Spring has actually been happening now for quite a long time, but Janet oriented me today as we drove around that it's quite new that spring is here, and I can see it in all the little leaves are all bright and fresh and very, very new. So one of the ways that we can think about this shift that happens when we spend time outdoors is that it's a shift from our usual doing mode and into more of what we could call a being mode. So in the doing mode, we're often trying to get somewhere, to make something happen other than what's actually happening in the here and now. So again, we're in this planning mode, this top-down, what about this? What should I do about this? How do I get to here? How do I get rid of this? How do I get somewhere else than where I'm actually at? So that's when we're really in this constant doing mode. And it's like we want to have something happen other than what's already happening. When we're in doing mode, this particular moment that we're in, right here, right now, is not enough. So we're constantly trying to get to another moment that might be a better moment, might have more satisfaction for us. So as the Buddha pointed to again and again in his teaching, we often experience this inherent sense of dissatisfaction with our current experience. It's a sense of inner restlessness, a sense of inner discontentment, a subtle or not so subtle state of suffering. And this is what the Buddha called dukkha. So dukkha is the Pali word for the word suffering. And this was one of the core teachings of the Buddha that he pointed to, that this inherent dissatisfaction, this inherent dukkha really is a great cause of more suffering, of more pain. And so with this state of discontent, with this state of suffering, often comes a lot of elaborate thoughts about the past and the future and even about the present. And as I said, we often feel that this particular moment that we're in is not good enough. And so we have many thoughts about how we can manipulate our current moment to get to another and better experience. So in the Pali language, the language of the Buddha's teachings, all of these thoughts, this train of thoughts, they're called papancha. And I think it's a great word, papancha. In some ways, it really in some ways embodies this energy of all these thoughts. The English word would be a proliferation of thoughts. And I think we probably all know this experience of proliferation of thoughts. I know I do. So I'm thinking probably, at least some of you probably know what that feels like. So it's like the mind is spinning off into an explosion of worries and plans and hopes and fears. And it's like a fountain of ungrounded thoughts spewing out in all directions. So you may think about the last time you had this papancha attack in your own mind and what it was like when one thought led to another thought and just going on and on. So the Buddha taught us that this papancha, this proliferation of thoughts, are driven by this basic sense of discontentment. And again, another way to describe it is as a sense of inner lack or a sense of inner hollowness inside. That again gives this lack, this hollowness, this sense of like something is missing, drives this looking for external experiences, looking for something that can fill the void, fill the hollowness, fill the sense of lack inside. And yet the more mental energy we spend on trying to fill the void, fill the sense of lack inside, the further and further we move away from a present moment experience. And that's so interesting, right? Because if you can just remember in your own mind when you've had a sense of contentment, right? It's when we're really here, right? So it's not about what's happening 10 years ago or where we're going to get to next or what happened last year. This deep sense of contentment really happens when we are really present with this moment, just as it is. So again, thinking about moments in nature, right? You may have had this experience for yourself of, the moment was just enough. Nothing else needed to happen. You were just in the moment and it was enough just the way it is. So in what we could call more of this being mode, we're in a much more receptive place. The body, the mind, and the heart are all in this natural state of contentment. This moment is enough just as it is. Nothing else is needed to make this moment any better than it is. We're not chasing a more fulfilling experience. And so in this contented state of being, we are resting back and down into a receptive mode. There can be this sense of relaxation, and it's an awake relaxation. It's not a tuned out relaxation. It's a receptive, awake relaxation where our eyes are just receiving sights as they are. We're walking around outside and we're seeing green leaves and we're seeing birds and we're seeing water, and our ears are just receiving sounds as they are. We're not adding a ton of stories or we're not getting associated thoughts with the sounds. We're just receiving the sound of the birds or the sound of the wind and receiving the sense of smells just the way they are, the smells hitting the nose, smells coming and going, sweet smells, smells of the earth. And we're receiving the taste the way they are, and our bodies are receiving the sense sensations just the way they are. Just the simplicity of body moving, body walking, body breathing, receiving experience of body. And in this state of being, sometimes our minds are even receiving thoughts just as they are. So our thoughts, again, are not so compelling. They're still moving through the mind, but they're way more like weather patterns moving through, and they don't grab our attention so much. So maybe you know this for yourself. If you can remember even small moments, I'm not looking for long stretches of this ongoing ease, but just even small moments when there's been this sense of being and this sense of simplicity and then sense of mind just not getting so much in papancha mode. So I recently I've had some very vivid experiences of how being in nature can really invite this sense of presence. So this spring I spent a number of months on a beautiful small island in British Columbia called Gabriel Island. And this island, just to tell you about the size of it, it's so small that there's no cell phone reception. So that's a relief, don't have to worry about having a cell phone. And yet, as I was spending these months on this island, right, and I was right on the water, it was quite lovely. I still had my busy working days inside, meeting with students, meeting with clients online, and doing a lot of work on the computer. So my mind was quite busy with all of this. But what I really started to notice was that as soon as the day was over and I went down to the beach or I went for a walk, it was like all the busyness of my mind, it was like nature just sucked it all out of my mind. It wasn't anything I intended to do, but it was just simply coming out and like, wow, sounds and ocean and smells and all the things that had seemed so incredibly important 10 minutes ago, totally, it was like they vanished. They had never even been there. I could pick them up again the next day, but the mind was very, very happy to release them. So very quickly the mind got just very simple and very quiet. Just walking, feeling the body, noticing the wind, the sound in the clouds. So you may remember and connect with some of your own experiences of this, and how your own mind might have quieted down in nature. And one of the other things that we may notice is that actually the body, when the mind is quite busy and we're engaged in a lot of things, the body also tends to hold a lot of tension. Have you noticed this? So when we walk around, we actually probably don't notice it because our attention is so pulled up and out into everything around us. But when we're in that more busy state, if we check the body, we'll see that it often holds a lot of contraction, a lot of tension. And so again, just to check out for yourself this weekend, as you come into nature, what actually happens to your body, what happens to your breath, as you take in nature through your senses. So if you're sitting here right now thinking, I don't know what Kristina is talking about, this is all very strange. What is this being mode? What is this doing mode? I just want to tell you not to worry, okay? So what I'm pointing to is actually something that's quite subtle. So it's very natural and understandable that we wouldn't necessarily notice this shift into this more easeful place. We humans, if we check it out for ourselves, we humans, our minds are really geared to notice danger, to notice problems, to notice issues, to notice difficulties. In some ways, it's part of our deep nervous system. We're sort of geared this way to pay attention to where there's some kind of issue, some kind of trouble. So it's very understandable that this is where our attention often goes to. So this means that we often miss these small moments of subtle ease, because when there is a downregulation, a shift into more of a being mode, often what happens is that then the mind tunes out. It's like, I don't have to be present for this. There's nothing to worry about here. And so the mind, our attention doesn't really know how to pay attention to when there's more of an absence of struggle, an absence of tension, an absence of challenge. So often these moments of being are not these big, glorious moments that we share with others. Hey, I had this beautiful moment of being. 5 minutes, the sounds were amazing and the sights were amazing and my mind was quiet. That's not what we share with other people, right? It's not often what we think about as a great moment. So what's true about these moments is that they are characterized by an absence of stress. So it's not sort of like a big glorious, it can be a joyful moment, but most often it's that we have a lot of stress in the mind and we have a lot of stress in the body, and under the right conditions, the mind releases some of the stress in the mind and some of the stress in the body, and then there's this absence of stress. And we actually have to pay attention to know the absence of stress. This is what the Buddha called also, this is a moment of the ending of suffering, a moment of the release of dukkha. And we have, in some ways, to train our minds to notice when there is an absence of dukkha. And according to the teachings of the Buddha, these small moments can be seen as temporary liberations of the mind. So this is the mind that's temporarily freed from a sense of inner stress, from a sense of greed, of wanting to get somewhere else than where it's at. So the potential well-being, when we can train ourselves to notice this shift and this release of tension, can be a really important reference point for us, because it points to a deeper potential of liberation of the body and the mind and the heart that these teachings are pointing to. And having a reference point can really be really helpful, because again, it can teach us when we're in a lot of suffering and when there's these moments of the release of suffering. So what is it about being immersed in a natural environment, in nature, in this relatively untouched environment, that has the potential of inviting us into more of this being mode, into a greater sense of ease and well-being? What is it about nature that has this invitation to us? So one way to think about this is to think that all the trees, all the plants, the waters, the birds and the insects, all the animals, they are not pointing to anything other than themselves. They are in themselves just resting back and down into their own beingness, into their own naturalness. They're just being themselves. They're just expressing their own naturalness. They're not pointing to, a tree is not pointing to anything that it already is. It's just a tree. And on the contrary, all the things in the cities, all the human-made things, the cars, the shops, the bikes, the houses, the roads, the schools, the government buildings, and even the green spaces of the cities that are deliberately cultivated and for pressure and use, they are in some ways external manifestations of our own inherent drive for something better. So we created these things to make our lives better, right? That doesn't mean that they're bad, all these things, but just that they have this inherent, they're inherently made, created, constructed, fabricated, thought up for us to get somewhere else than what's actually happening. So as we move around in the city environment and we interact with all the stuff of the city, we automatically engage with all the motivations that are inherent in the making of all this stuff. The stuff to entertain us, the stuff to make us more comfortable, the stuff to make life more exciting, the stuff to make us smarter, the stuff to make us more beautiful, the stuff to make us more attractive. When we're moving around in a city environment, all our senses are constantly bombarded with all this stuff that's made to bring us something else, to make us happy, to create a better moment than the one that we're actually in. So no wonder in the cities that we often automatically move into more of this doing mode, right? If you think about it, everything you see in the cities, in some ways, even though we don't think about it, but it brings up this I'm doing, I'm making, I'm creating, I'm getting somewhere, I'm relating to this world that we have created. So again, I want to say it's not that this stuff is bad. I think a lot of it is quite useful, and most of us wouldn't live without much of the stuff we have. So just to say I'm not against stuff, or I'm not against city environment, that would be creating a duality. It's just that there is a lot of it, and that our senses often gets overloaded, and our minds get highly activated with all the things that we are relating to. So one of the basic things that we can forget in the city environment as we are engaging with all the man-made stuff is that we are just like part of nature, like all other living beings around us, like all other living things. These bodies, these minds are all just part of nature. And yet with these complex human minds that can dream up and invent incredible things, we often forget that these human bodies and these human minds are just part of the natural world, like everything else around us, just part of nature. And it's interesting because we often like to sit outside and study nature, how interesting nature is. We're fascinated by the natural laws of the ecosystem, the complex interrelationships between weather patterns, vegetation, and various life forms. And we're really fascinated with other species, amazed at how complex their feeding systems are, mating systems are, their social behaviors. We're really amazed at this. And often we're amazed at how they can operate. How do they operate? How do they all do this? Like, because we're so identified with our minds, and we often think it's our minds that make things happen. But then we look at the natural world and we see this very complex ecosystem that has a totally different type of intelligence. That doesn't really mirror back to us how much importance we give our minds and the type of intelligence that our minds have. And yet when we look at this body-mind, we see that our own human bodies also move through cycles and patterns, just like everything else in nature. So we move through cycles of wakefulness and sleep, hunger and fullness, relaxation and alertness, mating and procreation cycles. And then we have these amazing human attachment systems, right? These bonding systems, these ways that we relate to other people, these ways that we go into families and we create, intimate relationships, love relationships, friendships. And within these cycles of the attachment system, we move through bonding and separation cycles, connection and disengagement cycles, rupture and repair cycles. We have an argument and then we repair it, and then we have another argument and then we repair it. There's these cycles. And then as we do in meditation, and which most of you have probably seen for yourself, this human mind moves through a lot of patterns as well. There are thinking patterns, boredom patterns, anger patterns, joy patterns, fear patterns, restlessness, and relaxations. This is part of what we get to see when we sit in practice, is that the patterns of the mind are coming and going, and it's like they have their own life a little bit. And again, as much as we think that we are in control of our experience, we get to see in many ways that with all of these different patterns and cycles in our minds and our hearts and our bodies, that we are just like a piece of nature, just the same as everything else in nature. So again, there's often a gap between how much control we think we have and then our direct experience of these ungovernable patterns and cycles of the sky, of the body and mind. And we often liken it as cloud formations moving through the sky. So like clouds that are forming, dissipating, moving along, these patterns can be seen that same way. And yet, our complex human minds with all the inventions often gives us a sense that we are different from the ecosystem that we're part of, and often that we are somehow superior to the ecosystem. And this often brings us into a state of disharmony with the world around us, with the ecosystem that we're part of. And if we think about our own body, hearts, and minds as part of the ecosystem, I'm sure you can all think about how you might also sometimes be out of harmony with this piece of nature. I know I am, you know. So just like we try to control the outer environment, often we also try to control our inner environment. You know, the nature of our bodies and hearts and minds, we often have this top-down, intention to try to control it. And we try to control the way the bodies look, the way they feel, the way they perform, make them, be in a different way, act in a different way, perform in a different way. And then our bodies, in some ways, become an instrument to our further sense of achievement in the world. They become another extension of what we want to become, what we want to create, what we want to do. And I don't know if some of you can relate to this. I'll go to the gym for 5 hours. Is that really a listening in, or is it more like I want to make this body be a certain way? Or I want to go on this diet, Is that really because we're paying attention to the needs of the body, or is it more, I want to have the shape of the body be a certain way? So with this way of relating to the body, we often forget to simply be in our bodies, to rest in our bodies, to, what you could say, inhabit our bodies. So I've often thought that the disconnection that we have with our own bodies is really closely related to the disconnection that we sometimes have with the environment around us. That there really is this connection. Right? So it's really hard for us to imagine that we are able to be sensitive to what goes on around us if we are not sensitive to what goes on inside of us. So how would we be sensitive to, to our consumptions and, what we do and how we are with the environment if we're really out of tune with our own bodies? So I think there's this deep relationship between this sense of listening to, the nature within our bodies for us to be able to listen to nature outside of us. So as we seek to restore a deeper connection with the nature within our bodies and within our environments, we may also have to face some of the inherent vulnerability of our human existence that we're often trying to run from. So part of what we're trying to forget with all the amazing things that we create is that we, like anything in nature, will get sick, will age, and will die. So this is one of the realities, one of the parts of being part of nature is that everything that arises in nature, this is one of the teachings of the Buddha, everything that arises in nature also has the nature to pass. This is part of that lawfulness of nature. And this is also true of our own bodies and the bodies of everybody dear to us. That everybody dear to us also have these bodies that will mean that at some point they will die, they will age, they will pass away. So I think we often try to run from these truths individually and collectively, yet deep down inside, we may still feel this shared sense of vulnerability of our fragile existence. And we're often quite afraid to look at this, to acknowledge this. And so we try to get away from it, run from it, and not look at it. And yet within the Buddhist teachings, this truth of sickness, aging, and death are called the heavenly messengers. They are, the Buddha actively invited us to look at these truths, to let them inspire us to come to terms with the way things are, so that we can let nature be nature and we can have a greater ease with the way that things are, for us to actually look at this vulnerability, inherent vulnerability, and not run from it. So this is, I hope this wasn't too heavy for you. These are really central parts of the Buddha's teaching, so I didn't want to avoid them. And yet I wanted to say that for this weekend, I think part of the way into understanding some of these truths is actually that we, again, that we attune to ease, and that we attune to the potential, what can I say, the potential healing that can come from a simple, present awareness with nature around us and nature within us. But this is part of a much deeper practice, a much deeper wisdom that we are exploring together. So one way to restore this sense of inner and outer connection is to bring mindfulness to the body, and to practice gently and kindly listening, attuning to and honoring our direct felt sense of the body, and also to practice gently, kindly attuning to and listening to the natural environment around us, so that this inner and outer mindfulness can mutually support each other. So as we tune in with a kind, gentle, attuned, non-intrusive, receptive exploration of our own body sensations, this, I think, can invite us to be more sensitive to the nature around us. And then because nature, as I said, it doesn't point to anything other than it is. You know, the natural environment rests back and down in and on itself. Being in nature might invite us into a deeper exploration of our own bodies. That's the hope. So just a few words about mindfulness. I think most of you have practiced mindfulness and have heard of mindfulness. And so again, mindfulness is this receptive, non-judgmental knowing of our experience, a non-interfering knowing of what's happening. I really like the translation of intimacy. So I love that way of thinking about mindfulness, that it's a way of becoming very intimate with our experience. So mindfulness, sometimes we think about it as sort of like an outside witnessing of experience, like we're removed from experience and sometimes looking at what's happening from the outside. But if we can think about it as an intimacy, we're still deeply in it. We're actually in it. We're actually feeling the body. We're actually opening to the sounds of the birds. We're actually feeling the sun on the skin. We're very intimate with it, but we also are really knowing it very clearly. Another image that's inspired me greatly in my own practice, and some of you may have heard of it, and I can't remember where I heard of it, so I can't say who said it. But it's to think about mindfulness as the sun. So again, if you think about standing in the sun, when it shines on something, it illuminates what we're looking at, right? By illuminating it, we see what the sun is shining on with clarity. And yet another quality of the sun is that it's warm. Right? So when we stand in the sun, we can feel the warmth of the sun, a softening, a melding, a way that we can feel held by the warmth of the sun. So we can think about mindfulness as maybe having these two parts to it. There's a clear seeing, there's a clear knowing, there's a shining a light on what we're exploring, what we're looking at. And also that it has this quality of gentleness, this quality of softening, this quality of warmth, this quality of, if you think about your own body, you know, just now you're coming into spring here, right? So you've been bundled up and, you know, walking around maybe with some, you know, contracted muscles, and now feeling the sun, you can feel how the body is, you know, opening, responding. So can the mindfulness be the same way? Clarity, but also this warm, kind, gentle way of being with our experience. So a really important part of mindfulness of the body, and one of the main reasons why, I think the Buddha put so much weight on it, so much emphasis on mindfulness of the body, is that the body is always in the here and now. Right? So the thoughts are about something that happened last week or yesterday or what's going to happen next week. But the body, when we come into the body doesn't lie and is always in the here and now. So the sensations of the body is a direct doorway into here and now presence. And also the state of the body is often a good indication of the state of the mind. So when the mind is agitated, stressed, concerned, if we check the body, we'll see that often there's a correlation. There's a tightness in the neck, in the chest, in the arms, or other places in the body. And the same, in a way, is also true the other way around. So a contracted body, a tension in the body, often will give rise to more tension in the mind. So there's this back and forth relationship between the mind and the body. So this last fall, my partner is also a Dharma teacher. We taught a 12-week program for meditators on mindfulness of the body. And a very important teaching, very simple, but sort of core teaching that we gave the meditators through all 12 weeks, in some ways same instructions, was the instruction, come back and down. So come back and down into your body. I don't want to say we didn't advance much from that, but you think, is it all what you did in 12 weeks? It was something we kept coming back to because we also needed, my partner and I also need this very simple coming back and down into the bodies. So coming back and down into your body literally means to let your attention come to the backside of your body and travel down the backside of your body, down through the legs and into the feet. So I'm just going to invite us all to do it right now, if you can. So you don't have to close your eyes, but just sit back together in your seat and see if you can let your attention, let your awareness go sort of to the backside of your body. Maybe start at the upper body, the neck, behind the shoulder blades, down through the lower back, into the seat, into the legs, into the feet. And then there can still be all kinds of other things happening in the body, but it's just a way, in some ways, to ground the body by making this invitation for the attention to come back and down. And as you do this, you may notice that your body may take a deeper breath. You may notice that your shoulders may come down just a little bit. No forcing, just an invitation. Resting back and down into the body. So now, releasing this little exercise, we'll do more over the weekend. But you can try, many times, even tonight, and even for the rest of this talk. I won't have much more to say before we move into a practice period. But you may practice coming back and down. So whenever you notice that, that you're coming up and out, you're leaving your bodies, you're in your thoughts, then you might, if you can, remind yourself, could I just take a moment, sit back, let the attention come back downside the body and just ground myself in this very simple way. So, very soon we will actually move into sitting practice together, and then we'll have some question and answers. I don't want to make it a long evening. It's a Friday evening. Many of you have already had a long week. But before we do that, I want to end this talk by reading a poem. And it's a poem by Mary Oliver. Many of you may be familiar with her. And Mary Oliver was a poet. She's passed away now. But most of her poems were about nature and also inspired by Buddhism. So I thought it would be really nice for us to listen to this poem. So I want to invite you to come back and down into your bodies. And again, see if you can listen from inside of your body. So you can keep your eyes open, but you could also close your eyes. And again, letting the words come in as much as they want, letting your body receive the words, letting your mind receive the words, not needing to understand everything that she's saying, but trusting that whatever meaning is here for you to open to today will be here. So this poem is called Sleeping in the Forest. I thought the earth remembered me. She took me back so tenderly, arranging her dark skirts, her pockets full of license and seeds. I slept as never before, a stone on a riverbed, nothing between me and the white fire of the stars but my thoughts. And they floated light as moths among the branches of the perfect trees. All night I heard the small kingdoms breathing around me, the insects and the birds who do their work in the darkness. All night I rose and I fell as if water grappling with a luminous doom. By morning, I had vanished at least a dozen times into something better. So we'll just take a moment together to take in those words and just sit together in silence for just a little bit.